The summons. Ambassador Kalen Thorne stood before the viewport of the transport vessel Wanderer's Hope, watching the impossible structure grow larger against the void. The Grand Concordat, a station the size of a small moon, built by species whose civilizations had flourished when Earth was still cooling magma. First time? Asked his aide, a young woman named Sirena Vex, her dark eyes reflecting the station's bioluminescent glow. Kalen nodded, straightening his ceremonial jacket. First time any human has been summoned to the council chamber proper. Usually we're relegated to the outer galleries. The message had arrived 3 days ago, delivered by a Zephyrite courier whose crystalline form had chimed with barely concealed disdain. Humanity was to present itself before the Thousand Species Council to answer for an incident in the Karthos sector. Something about violating ancient territorial boundaries that humans hadn't even known existed until last Tuesday. The docking procedure took an hour. The Wanderer's Hope was tiny compared to the organic ships of the Vrelan Dominion or the phase-shifting vessels of the Temporal Concord. As Kalen and Sirena disembarked, they were met by a Thalorian guide, a floating sphere of contained plasma that spoke in bursts of color. Follow. Chamber awaits. You are late. We arrived precisely on schedule, Sirena countered, checking her datapad. The guide pulsed an irritated orange. Others arrived 3 cycles early. Is human custom to show disrespect? Kalen placed a calming hand on Sirena's shoulder. We meant no offense. Please lead the way. They walked through corridors that defied physics, spaces that seemed larger inside than outside, gravity that shifted based on species preference, walls that displayed the history of 1,000 worlds. Kalen saw civilizations that had mastered quantum manipulation before humanity discovered fire. He saw species that had evolved beyond physical form, existing as pure thought housed in elegant crystalline matrices. And in every historical mural, every triumphant display, humanity was conspicuously absent. They were the newcomers. The children. The species that had only just learned to leave their cradle. The corridor opened into an antechamber where other minor species waited to present their cases. A delegation of Threnic, insectoid beings with mirror-like carapaces, clicked nervously in the corner. Beside them, a Solmian representative kept its 6 eyes downcast, its tentacles wrapped tightly around its petition scroll. They're terrified, Sirena whispered. Wouldn't you be? Kalen gestured to the chamber doors ahead. Massive structures carved from neutronium, covered in scripts from languages that predated human writing by millions of years. The Council's judgments can elevate a species to protected status or condemn them to quarantine. A single decision in there can save or doom entire civilizations. The doors suddenly groaned open, and a Threnic delegate stumbled out, their carapace cracked, mandibles quivering. Behind them, a voice like grinding glaciers proclaimed, Threnic petition denied. Territory will be absorbed. Next case. The other delegates pressed themselves against the walls as if trying to disappear into them. Humanity. The Council calls humanity. Kalen took a deep breath and stepped forward. Sirena followed, her jaw set with determination that reminded him why he'd chosen her for this mission. She was 26, brilliant, and possessed a stubbornness that was quintessentially human. The chamber beyond was breathtaking and terrible. It was a sphere 3 kilometers across, with the delegates' platform suspended in the exact center. Surrounding them on all sides were the representatives of the 1,000 species, though Kalen knew the actual count was closer to 1,400. Some appeared in person. The towering Vrelan with their 4 arms and crown of sensory horns, the Etherean light forms that drifted like conscious auroras, the ancient progenitor species whose bodies were ecosystems unto themselves. Others attended via proxy, their consciousnesses transmitted across impossible distances. Still others existed in adjacent dimensions, visible only as distortions in spacetime. The weight of 1,000 civilizations' attention pressed down on the 2 humans like a physical force. Kalen heard Sirena's breath catch. At the chamber's zenith sat the Council Triumvirate, the 3 eldest species, the ones who had founded the Concordat in an age before Earth's sun had ignited. The speaker was a Nexian, a being of pure thought and will, manifesting as a shifting constellation of geometric patterns. Humanity. The word echoed from every surface. You stand accused of 17 violations of Concordat law. How do you answer? Around them, Kalen felt it, the expectation of submission, of groveling, of fear. Every species in this chamber had learned to approach the Council with reverence and terror. Kalen smiled and met the Nexian's gaze directly. We answer that we're here to talk. The accusation. The silence that followed Kalen's words was absolute. Sirena felt her heart hammering against her ribs as 1,400 species processed the human ambassador's response. Around them, holographic displays flickered with confusion. Some species communicated through color changes, others through electromagnetic pulses, but all seemed to share the same bewilderment. The Nexian's geometric patterns contracted sharply. You presume to talk? This is not a negotiation, human. This is a judgment. Then we're already off to a bad start, Kalen replied, his voice steady but not confrontational. Because on Earth, judgment comes after understanding, and understanding requires dialogue. A ripple of reaction swept through the chamber. A Vrellan representative leaned forward, its sensory horns quivering with what Sirena's cultural database identified as aggressive curiosity. The human displays either ignorance or arrogance. Both are unbecoming before the council. I display neither, Kalen said. I display honest confusion. We're accused of 17 violations of laws we only learned existed 3 days ago. Laws that, I might add, seem to contradict at least 40 other Concordat regulations we were given when humanity first applied for membership. The third member of the triumvirate, a being called only the emissary, whose form seemed to exist in all moments simultaneously, spoke with a voice like wind through canyons. Ignorance is not defense. All species are bound by Concordat law, whether they comprehend it or not. Sirena activated her datapad, projecting the incident report into the chamber's central display. 3 weeks ago, human colony ship New Horizon entered the Carthos sector to establish a settlement on planet Carthos 5. We followed all established protocols. Deep space surveys confirmed no sentient life, no territorial markers, no active claims registered in the Concordat database. Yet you trespassed, hissed a Sithran representative, a serpentine being whose scales flickered with bioluminescent anger. On what? Kalen challenged. Show me the marker. Show me the registered claim. Show me any evidence that Carthos 5 was anything other than an unclaimed world. The Nexian's patterns pulsed. The Carthos sector lies within the sacred boundaries established by the Treaty of Eternal Accord, signed in the fourth epoch of the Concordat, cycle 2847 by your reckoning. That's 42,000 years before humans evolved, Sirena said quietly. How can we be bound by a treaty signed when we didn't exist? Because, a new voice interjected, deep, resonant, carrying the weight of ages, all who enter the Concordat accept its complete history. To join is to inherit all responsibilities, all obligations, all oaths sworn by those who came before. The speaker was Vorith Kellen, supreme arbiter of the Vrellan Dominion, one of the most powerful species in the Concordat. His 4 arms were folded across his massive chest, and his primary eyes fixed on Kalen with unmistakable hostility. Is that what you told us during our admission process? Kalen asked. Because I've read the entry protocols 14 times. Not once does it mention we're responsible for 42,000-year-old treaties. You were given access to the archive, Vorith rumbled. A database containing 400 million documents in 6,000 extinct languages, Sirena shot back. We were granted membership 3 years ago. Did you expect us to translate and memorize 500 million laws in that time? We expected you to exercise caution, the Nexian said. To move slowly. To consult the elder species before taking action. Instead, you rush forward like children playing with fire. Kalen's expression hardened. With respect, Speaker, we asked for guidance. Repeatedly. Human representatives filed 214 formal requests for legal clarification in the past 2 years alone. Do you know how many received responses? The chamber waited. 7, Kalen continued. 7 responses, most of them telling us to reference the archive, or consult established precedent. When we asked which precedents applied to species with our level of development, we were told that determining applicability was our responsibility. So you decided to act without certainty, Vorith said. Reckless. Typical of young species. No, Kalen countered. We acted with the best information available to us. We did our due diligence. And when we still found no clear guidance, we made a choice. That's not recklessness, that's survival. Species don't get to where we are by waiting for permission to breathe. A murmur rippled through the chamber, not agreement but something Sirena couldn't quite identify. Interest? Surprise? The emissary spoke again. The human makes a philosophical argument. But philosophy does not change law. You have violated the sacred boundaries. The penalty is standard, complete withdrawal from the Carthos sector, payment of reparations to all affected species, and restriction of human expansion for 10 cycles. 10 cycles, 50 years by Earth reckoning. For a species as young and rapidly growing as humanity, that might as well be a death sentence. Sirena saw Kalen's jaw tighten, but his voice remained calm. Who exactly did we harm? The planet was uninhabited. No structures, no active monitoring, not even a warning buoy. The only affected species seemed to be those who've suddenly remembered they had a claim to a world they'd forgotten for 40,000 years. You question the Council's judgment? The Nexian's patterns flashed dangerously. I question the fairness of the accusation, Kalen said simply. Around them, the chamber erupted. Species argued in 1,000 languages, displays flashing with outraged confusion and, surprisingly, some measured agreement. The Threnic delegate who'd been denied earlier watched with all 6 eyes wide, shocked that anyone would dare speak to the Council this way. But Kalen and Sirena stood firm, unafraid, awaiting the response. The defense. The cacophony in the Council chamber gradually subsided as the Nexian's geometric patterns expanded to fill the upper hemisphere, a clear signal for silence that every species recognized. Kalen felt Sirena shift beside him, ready for whatever came next. The human ambassador displays boldness, the Nexian finally said. Whether this is courage or foolishness remains to be determined. You wish to present a formal defense. We do, Kalen confirmed. Proceed. But know that defiance of Council judgment has consequences. Kalen nodded to Sirena, who expanded her display. 3-dimensional star maps filled the chamber's central space, showing human expansion over the past century. Since humanity achieved faster-than-light travel 87 years ago, we've established colonies on 42 worlds. Every single one was screened according to Concordat protocols. Deep bioscans, historical surveys, database checks, and consultation with regional authorities. She highlighted the Carthos sector. Carthos 5 passed every test. More than that, we spent 2 years studying it before committing to colonization. We found no evidence of previous settlement, no genetic markers of engineered life, nothing to suggest the world had ever been claimed. Yet the sacred boundaries, Vorith began, are invisible, Kalen interrupted. No physical markers. No subspace beacons. The only record exists in an archive document written in Old Zelnari, a language that went extinct 9,000 years ago and which only 47 species in this chamber can still read. How is that a reasonable standard for compliance? A new voice entered the debate, melodic, almost song-like. It belonged to Lashana Kelith, High Envoy of the Etherian Collective, beings of pure energy who were considered among the wisest in the Concordat. The human raises a valid concern. The sacred boundaries were established when the Concordat consisted of only 73 species, all of whom used Zelnari as the diplomatic standard. The system was adequate then. But not now, Sirena pressed. The Concordat has grown exponentially. Thousands of species have joined, each bringing their own languages, customs, and ways of understanding the galaxy. Yet the foundational laws remain in formats that most members cannot access. The emissary's temporal form flickered. You suggest the Council has failed in its duties? I suggest the Council has become a victim of its own success, Kalen said diplomatically. You've created the most expansive interstellar community in galactic history. But the infrastructure hasn't kept pace. Laws that made sense for 73 species become Byzantine labyrinths for 1400. Excuses, spat a Crethian representative, their rocky form grinding with irritation. Other species manage. Do they? Kalen challenged. Or do they simply stop exploring? Stop expanding? Accept stagnation rather than risk Council displeasure? The question hung in the air. Sirena noticed movement among some of the smaller species delegations. Nervous shifting, exchanged glances. The Solmian who'd waited with them earlier had all 6 eyes fixed on Kalen now. Vorith's sensory horns flattened against his skull, a virulent sign of aggressive contempt. You imply that fear of the Council suppresses natural development. This is insulting and incorrect. The Council's guidance has prevented countless wars, stopped ecological disasters, saved species from extinction. Your human arrogance blinds you to the wisdom of those who've survived when your world was primitive rock. And that wisdom is exactly what we're appealing to, Kalen said, modulating his tone to acknowledge the Arbiter's point. We don't question the Council's achievements or its good intentions. We're asking it to recognize that its methods, designed for a smaller, more homogeneous Concordat, may need updating for the diverse community it's become. The Nexian's patterns shifted, calculations processing, weighing options. A philosophical argument remains irrelevant. You violated specific law. Intent does not erase action. Then let's talk about the law itself, Sirena said, pulling up another document. The Treaty of Eternal Accord established the sacred boundaries to protect 17 species-claimed territories from encroachment by the Vrellan Dominion during their expansion period. Voritha's eyes narrowed dangerously. The treaty's purpose, Sirena continued, was to prevent a powerful, aggressive species from overwhelming smaller ones. It was a necessary protection. But look at the 17 species it was meant to shield. The display showed species names, homeworlds, and status reports. 3 are extinct. 5 have evolved beyond physical form and no longer maintain territorial claims. 6 have formally renounced their protected status. The remaining 3, including the Vrellan Dominion themselves, are now among the Concordat's most powerful members. The conditions that necessitated the sacred boundaries no longer exist, yet the boundaries remain, covering 17,000 star systems that no one actively claims or monitors. Lashana's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. The Etherian collective acknowledges this paradox. We ourselves abandoned our protected territories 6 epochs ago, yet the boundaries persist. Because removing them would require formal treaty revision, the Nexian stated. A process that demands unanimous consent from all signatory species, including those now extinct or transcended. Thus, stalemate. Exactly, Kalen said. The system has fossilized. Ancient laws remain enforced not because they serve current needs, but because the mechanism to change them is impossibly complex. And species like humanity, entering this environment, are expected to navigate these contradictions flawlessly or face punishment. You speak as if you are victims, Vorith growled. But you chose to join the Concordat. You agreed to its terms. We agreed to terms we thought we understood, Kalen replied. But we're learning that Concordat law is less a consistent legal framework and more a collection of geological layers, thousands of treaties, accords, and precedents, many contradicting each other with no clear hierarchy or method of resolution. And when we act in what appears to be compliance with one set of laws, we're accused of violating another set that was practically impossible to discover. The chamber filled with agitated discussion again. Sirena noticed something important. The smaller species were listening intently now, some nodding their equivalence of agreement. The Threnic delegate was conferring urgently with someone via holographic communication. But the powerful species, the Vrellan, the ancient progenitors, the dimensional beings, radiated hostility. They didn't appreciate having their system questioned. The emissary's voice cut through the noise. The human defense is noted. However, procedural concerns do not excuse lawbreaking. The Council's judgment stands. Unless. The being paused, its temporal form solidifying slightly. Unless the human delegation wishes to invoke their right to trial by precedent. Kalen exchanged glances with Sirena. Her eyes went wide. She'd found something in her rapid database search. She gave the slightest nod. We do, Kalen declared. Humanity invokes trial by precedent. The chamber exploded with reaction. Even Vorith seemed taken aback. The Nexian's patterns contracted sharply. You understand what you request? We do, Kalen said, though his pulse was racing. We request the Council examine all precedents of similar cases and judge us by the standards applied to others. Very well, the Nexian said, its tone suggesting satisfaction, or perhaps anticipation. Trial by precedent requires 3 cycles to prepare. You will present your case then. Until that time, all human expansion is suspended, and the New Horizon colony is placed under Concordat supervision. Agreed, Kalen said. As they were escorted from the chamber, Sirena leaned close. Do you actually know what trial by precedent means? Not entirely, Kalen admitted. But you found something, didn't you? She smiled grimly. Maybe. Or maybe I just bought us time to figure out how we got ourselves into a trial that, according to my database, has a 94% conviction rate. Better than the 100% we were facing. Behind them, the council chamber's doors ground shut. But Kalen couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't escaped judgment. They'd simply changed the terms of their execution. The discovery. The quarters assigned to the human delegation were sterile and uncomfortable, clearly designed for species with different physiological requirements. The gravity was slightly too high, the lighting spectrum slightly off, the furniture at angles that suggested the architect had never actually met a human. Kalen collapsed onto something that might have been a chair if humans had evolved with 3 legs. Well, we didn't get immediately ejected from the Concordat. I'm calling that a win. Sirena wasn't celebrating. She'd been working non-stop since their return, holographic displays surrounding her like a forest of glowing data. We need to understand what we just agreed to. Trial by precedent is mentioned in exactly 17 cases in the entire Concordat archive. That's out of millions of legal proceedings. And it's basically a trap. She pulled up case files. The theory is that the Concordat prides itself on consistent application of law. So if you believe you're being judged unfairly, you can demand the council show precedent, previous cases similar to yours, and apply the same standards. It's supposed to prevent arbitrary punishment. That sounds reasonable. It would be, except the council gets to choose which precedents are similar to your case. Look at this. She highlighted one example. The Melthorn incursion 4,000 years ago. A species expanded into supposedly protected space just like us. They invoked trial by precedent. The council found 17 precedents, and every single one supported conviction. The Melthorn civilization was quarantined to their home system for 20 generations. Kalen felt his stomach sink. So we just accelerated our own demise. Maybe. Sirena's expression was intense with the kind of determined concentration he'd seen when she was onto something. But I think I found why you made the right call. Look at the conviction dates. She overlaid a timeline. The 17 precedents the council had used were all from a single epoch, a 200-year period about 8,000 years ago. See the pattern? They didn't search the entire archive for relevant cases. They cherry-picked a specific time frame that supported their predetermined conclusion. Can we prove that? I spent the last 6 hours running search algorithms through the archive. The Concordat legal database contains over 400 million documents. Using the same search parameters that should have found those 17 precedents, I found 234 additional cases of territorial disputes involving undefined boundaries. Kalen leaned forward. And 47% resulted in exoneration or reduced penalties, especially when the accused species could demonstrate good faith effort to comply with available information. The Council has historically shown leniency to species navigating ambiguous territorial claims, but only when those species were powerful enough or politically connected enough to challenge the initial judgment. So the system has built-in bias toward the strong. Exactly. The weak accept the first judgment because they're afraid to challenge it. The strong invoke trials, appeals, precedent reviews, and suddenly the Council discovers flexibility in the law. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kalen's hand instinctively moved toward the stun weapon diplomats were permitted to carry, a sign of how on edge they both felt. Come in. The door opened to reveal an unexpected visitor, a Solmian, the same tentacled being they'd seen in the antechamber. Its 6 eyes regarded them with what the translation matrix indicated was nervousness. Forgive intrusion, it said in halting standard. I am Coordinator Zilfrin of the Solmian Compact. I needed to speak with humans. You're welcome here, Kalen said, gesturing to a seat, then realizing Samians didn't sit. How can we help? Zilfrin's tentacles twisted in agitation. Your words in council chamber. About laws that cannot be understood. About system that punishes the weak. These words, they resonated. You've experienced similar problems? Sirena asked. Solmian Compact is young species. Like humans. 300 years in Concordat. We try to follow all laws. But laws conflict. Laws hide in extinct languages. When we ask for guidance, elder species tell us we should already know. When we act without knowing, they punish us. Zilfrin's eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of deep distress. We thought this was normal. That we were simply inferior to elder species. But when I heard your ambassador question the system itself, you realized the problem might not be you, Kalen finished. Yes. And I am not alone. Zilfrin activated a small device, projecting a list of names and species designations. I have contacted others. 73 species, all considered minor by council standards. All have faced similar difficulties. All have accepted punishments they did not understand for violations they could not have predicted. We never spoke together before. Never organized. But humans spoke what we only thought in silence. Sirena's eyes widened. Coordinator, are you suggesting? I suggest nothing, Zilfrin said quickly. But I share information. In 3 days humans face trial by precedent. If humans win, if humans' proof system is broken, it would affect more than just humanity. It would give voice to 73 species who have been silent too long. After Zilfrin left, Kalen and Sirena sat in stunned silence. We're not just fighting for humanity, Sirena finally said. We've accidentally become champions for every species that's been ground down by this system. No pressure, Kalen muttered. He stood pacing the small space. We need help. Someone who understands the council's internal politics, who can navigate the power structures. Who would help us? The powerful species benefit from the current system. As if summoned by the question, the room's communication panel chimed. The holographic display showed an incoming message from an encrypted source. Kalen accepted it cautiously. The image that materialized was Lashana Keleth, the Etherean High Envoy. Her energy form was subdued, privacy-shielded. Ambassador Thorn. I am contacting you through unofficial channels, which should tell you the sensitivity of what I'm about to say. The Etherean Collective does not agree with the Council's judgment of your case. Then why didn't you speak up? Sirena challenged. Because the Etherean Collective speaks with one voice in public matters, and our consensus has not yet fully formed. But I speak now as an individual, offering information. The trial by precedent you face is not what it appears. What do you mean? Kalen asked. The Nexian speaker and Supreme Arbiter Vorith have been communicating privately since your species entered the Concordat. They view humanity as a threat, not militarily but philosophically. Humans ask uncomfortable questions. Humans challenge assumptions. Humans refuse to accept, because it has always been so, as sufficient answer. That's a threat. To a system built on unquestioned authority? Yes. They want to use your trial as an example. Not just to punish humanity, but to remind all younger species that challenging the Council is futile. They have already selected their precedents, all supporting conviction. They expect you to accept the judgment and submit. But we have counter-precedents, Sirena said. Cases where the Council showed leniency. Lashana's form flickered, the Etherean equivalent of a sad smile. Which they will declare not applicable, based on technicalities you won't have time to refute. The trial is designed to look fair while ensuring predetermined outcomes. Kalen felt anger rising. Then why have trials at all? Why not just impose judgment? Because the Concordat is built on the illusion of justice. Elder species maintain power by convincing younger species that the system is fair, that their subordinate status is earned rather than imposed. Your trial is theater, Ambassador. Necessary theater to maintain that illusion. So we're doomed? Not necessarily. Lashana's form brightened slightly. There is one precedent they cannot dismiss, because it involves the founding principles of the Concordat itself. I have transmitted the reference to your datapad. Use it wisely. And know that while the Etherean Collective cannot officially support you, many individual Etherians will be watching your trial with great interest. The transmission ended. Sirena grabbed her datapad, pulling up the file Lashana had sent. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something like awe. Kalen. This changes everything. What is it? She turned the display toward him. The first Concordat Charter. The original document, signed by the founding species. And there's a clause here, Provision 17, that I don't think has been invoked in recorded history. Kalen read it, then read it again. A slow smile spread across his face. They're not going to like this. No, Sirena agreed. But they won't be able to ignore it either. They had their strategy. Now they just needed the courage to execute it. The trial. The council chamber was even more crowded than before. Word had spread about the humans' trial, and species from across the Concordat had sent representatives or tuned in via remote transmission. The gallery spaces were packed with curious observers, many of them from younger, minor species who'd never seen anyone challenge the council so directly. Kalen and Sirena stood once again on the central platform, but this time they weren't alone. Behind them, projected via hologram due to distance and biology, stood Coordinator Zilfrin and representatives from 12 other minor species. They'd offered to stand witness, a symbolic gesture that hadn't gone unnoticed. The Nexians' geometric patterns were sharper than before, more angular, irritation, according to Sirena's behavioral database. The trial by precedent begins. The Council has reviewed the Carthos sector incident and identified relevant precedents. We shall present them now. Holographic displays filled the chamber, 17 case files, exactly as Sirena had predicted. Vorith stepped forward to narrate, his forearms gesturing dramatically. The Melthrin incursion. The Kelthos expansion. The Vreen colonial error. All cases where species violated sacred territorial boundaries. All resulted in conviction and sanction. The pattern is clear and consistent. All from the same 200-year period 8,000 years ago, Sirena noted. All from an era when the Concordat had fewer than 300 member species. Relevance is determined by circumstance, not date, the Nexian said dismissively. Then let's talk about circumstance, Kalen said. Every one of those cases involved species that had been explicitly warned about the territories they were entering. The Melthran received 17 official warnings over a decade. The Kelthos were given detailed boundary maps. The Vreen ignored a direct council prohibition. None of that applies to humanity's situation. Ignorance of law, Vorith began. Is not the issue, Kalen interrupted. The issue is accessibility of law. We've documented our attempts to comply. 214 requests for clarification. 2 years of surveying Carthos 5. Database searches using every parameter we were given. We did everything a good faith actor could reasonably do. Yet you violated the sacred boundaries, the Nexian stated. Did we? Sirena pulled up her own display. Because according to our analysis, the legal status of the sacred boundaries is ambiguous at best. The Treaty of Eternal Accord was signed by 17 species. 3 are extinct. 5 no longer maintain physical territories. 6 formally renounced their protected status. 3 remain active, including the Vrellan Dominion, which was the species the treaty was meant to restrict. Vorith's sensory horns flattened dangerously. You dare suggest? I suggest that a treaty designed to protect weak species from strong ones loses meaning when the protected species become the powerful enforcers. I suggest that maintaining boundaries that no one actually uses or monitors serves no purpose except creating traps for newcomers. The chamber erupted with discussion. Kalen noticed movement in the galleries, minor species representatives leaning forward, recording everything. The emissary's voice cut through the noise. The human makes arguments about policy. But precedent is clear. 17 cases, 17 convictions. The law is consistent. Is it? Kalen took a breath. This was the moment. Because we found other precedents. 234 cases, in fact, involving territorial disputes with ambiguous boundaries. Want to know how many resulted in full conviction? Irrelevant cases, Vorith rumbled. Decided by whom? You. The cases we found meet the same search parameters as yours. The only difference is that they tell a more complicated story, one where the Council has historically shown flexibility and understanding, especially when the accused species demonstrated good faith. Those cases involve different circumstances, the Nexian said. Such as, the accused species had political relationships with Council members. They had advocates among the elder species. The Nexian stopped, seeming to realize what it had just admitted. They had power, Sirena finished quietly. That's the real precedent, isn't it? The Council shows mercy to those strong enough to demand it and punishes those too weak to fight back. Justice isn't consistent, it's political. The chamber fell silent. It was one thing to suspect such inequity, it was another to hear it nearly confirmed by the speaker itself. Kalen pressed the advantage. The trial by precedent is supposed to prove consistent application of law. But you can't have it both ways. Either all precedents matter, including the 234 cases we found, or precedent is selectively applied based on factors having nothing to do with justice. Which is it? The human twists words, Vorith snarled. This is why younger species require guidance. You lack wisdom to understand nuance. I understand that you're not answering the question. Lashana's energy form pulsed from the Etherian delegation space. The human has identified a legitimate inconsistency in the Council's application of precedent. If trial by precedent is to have meaning, all relevant precedents must be considered, not just those supporting a predetermined conclusion. The Etherian speaks out of turn, the Nexian said sharply. The Etherian speaks truth, Lashana replied calmly. As do others who have remained silent too long. Movement rippled through the chamber. A Grenthian representative stood, a species so ancient they'd been part of the Concordat's founding. The Grenthian collective acknowledges the human's point. The precedents presented appear selectively chosen. A phase walker, existing partially in another dimension, added their voice. The phase walker syndicate has observed increasing rigidity in council judgments. The human's analysis suggests systematic bias. Vorith's eyes widened with rage. You side with them? Against the council? We side with consistency, the Grenthian said. If the council claims to judge by precedent, then let all precedents be examined. The Nexian's patterns swirled chaotically, uncertainty, anger, calculation. This trial has become disorderly. We call recess to review. No. Kalen's voice rang out. You called this trial. You demanded we justify ourselves before precedent. We're not done. You have no authority to. I invoke Provision 17 of the First Concordat Charter. The chamber froze. Even the emissary's temporal forms solidified in surprise. That provision has not been invoked in millennia, the Nexian said slowly. Then it's overdue. Kalen pulled up the ancient document, displaying it for all to see. For those unfamiliar, Provision 17 states that any species accused before the Council has the right to demand full disclosure of all relevant legal precedents and to challenge the Council's interpretation of law if systematic bias can be demonstrated. The provision was meant for the founding species, Vorith objected. It applies to all Concordat members. Read it. Any species, regardless of age or status, stands equal before the law. Those are your words, Speaker. The founding principle of this entire organization. The Nexians' patterns contracted so tightly they almost disappeared. You would use our own charter against us? I would use it as intended, Kalen said. To ensure justice is actually just. We've demonstrated that your precedents are selectively chosen. We've identified hundreds of contradictory cases you ignored. We've shown that your judgment appears predetermined rather than evidence-based. Under Provision 17, we demand a full review by neutral arbiters, not the triumvirate who've already shown bias. This is outrageous, Vorith boomed. This is law, said the Grenthian quietly. The human is correct. Provision 17 is clear. Supporting this sets dangerous precedent, the emissary warned. More dangerous than allowing the Council to become a tool of oppression? Lashana asked. The human asks only for what the Charter guarantees, equal treatment under consistently applied law. The chamber erupted into the most intense debate Kalen had ever witnessed. Species argued in languages and mediums humans couldn't fully perceive. Political alliances that had stood for epochs suddenly came under scrutiny. The minor species gallery erupted in what their translation matrices struggled to interpret but which sounded like hope. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the Nexian spoke. Its patterns were subdued, almost defeated. The Council acknowledges the invocation of Provision 17. The case will be reviewed by a panel of neutral arbiters selected from non-triumvirate species. Judgment is suspended pending review. Kalen felt Sirena grip his arm in relief and triumph. However, the Nexian continued, the Council notes that this proceeding has exposed deep divisions within the Concordat. The human delegation will remain on the Grand Concordat station until the review is complete. And we suggest they spend that time considering whether they truly wish to continue this path. Is that a threat? Sirena asked. It is advice, the emissary said. You have won a battle, young humans. But you may have started a war you cannot finish. The chamber began to empty, but Kalen noticed something crucial. Many of the minor species representatives were approaching, wanting to speak. Zilfrin reached them first, all 6 eyes bright with emotion. You did it. You actually did it. We got a delay, Kalen said. Not a victory. You got more than delay. You got proof that challenging the system is possible. That is everything. As they were escorted back to their quarters, Kalen couldn't shake the emissary's warning. They'd exposed corruption at the heart of the Concordat's legal system. They'd embarrassed the most powerful species in the galaxy. They'd given hope to the oppressed. Any one of those things could get them killed. All of them together might just change everything. The conspiracy. The quarters felt different now, less like diplomatic housing and more like a holding cell. Kalen noticed the subtle changes. Additional security sensors in the corridors, surveillance glyphs that hadn't been there before, guards of species known for their combat prowess stationed at intersections. The message was clear, they were being watched. 12 messages in the last hour, Sirena reported, scrolling through her datapad. 8 from minor species wanting to coordinate testimony for the review. 3 from mid-tier species expressing concern about our methods. 1 from the Vrellan Dominion that's basically a thinly veiled threat. Let me guess, Vorith suggesting we'd be wise to withdraw our challenge? Worse. He's suggesting that if we persist, humanity's continued membership in the Concordat might be reconsidered. She looked up. Kalen, they're going to try to expel us. Before he could respond, the door chimed. Kalen activated the security screen and was surprised to see Lashana, but not alone. With her were 2 other beings he recognized from the chamber, Grenthian Elder Morvith and a phase walker called Shimmer Between States. We need to speak, Lashana said simply. And we need to speak now, before those monitoring your quarters realize we're here. Kalen glanced at Sirena, who'd already initiated privacy protocols, jamming signals that would buy them a few minutes at best. Come in. Quickly. The three elder species entered, their very presence making the small quarters feel impossibly crowded. Morvatha's rocky form settled into what might have been a seated position. What you did in the council chamber was necessary, the Grenthian began without preamble. And foolish. And brave. And potentially catastrophic. We just asked for fair treatment, Sirena said. You challenged the foundation of power in the Concordat, Shimmer corrected, their form flickering between visible and invisible. The Triumvirate's authority rests on the assumption that they are wise, benevolent, and just. You proved they are none of those things. So they'll destroy us to protect that assumption, Kalen concluded. They will try, Lashana said. Vorith and the Nexian are already coordinating. They plan to delay the neutral review indefinitely while building a coalition to expel humanity from the Concordat entirely. Without our protection and trade access, humanity's expansion will be severely limited. Your species will be isolated. Can they actually do that? Sirena asked. With enough political support, yes, Morvath rumbled. They are calling in favors, making promises, threatening consequences. Many species who privately agree with your position will publicly support your expulsion because they fear retribution. So we're finished? Not necessarily. Shimmer's form solidified slightly. The three of us represent a faction that has been concerned about the Concordat's direction for some time. We are not alone. There are approximately 200 species who believe the current power structure has become corrupt and self-serving. But you've been silent until now, Kalen noted. Because we lacked a catalyst, Lashana admitted. The Triumvirate's control is maintained through fear and inertia. No single species was willing to risk being the first to challenge them. But humanity, young, reckless, unaware of how impossible your task was, you became that catalyst. We're not trying to start a revolution, Sirena protested. Too late, Morvath said bluntly. Revolution has already begun. The question now is whether it succeeds or whether you all become its first casualties. Kalen's mind raced. What exactly are you proposing? A coalition, Lashana said. 200 species, including some of the Concordat's oldest and most respected members, formally supporting humanity's position. Not just on the Carthos case, but on the broader issue of legal reform and equal treatment. If you have 200 species, why do you need us? Because you're the ones who stood in that chamber and said what everyone was thinking but feared to voice, Shimmer explained. You're the symbol. The proof that challenging the Triumvirate is possible. Without you, our coalition would look like a power grab by rival elder species. With you, it's a genuine reform movement. So we're useful propaganda. You're essential leadership, Morvath corrected. Make no mistake, this will be dangerous. The Triumvirate will not surrender power peacefully. There will be political warfare, economic pressure, perhaps even actual warfare if they grow desperate enough. Sirena looked at Kalen, her expression troubled. We should contact Earth. This is beyond our authority to decide. No time, Lashana said urgently. Communication to Earth takes weeks. The Triumvirate will move within days. We need your answer now. And if we refuse? Kalen asked. Then we go forward without you and you face expulsion alone, Shimmer said. We're offering you a choice. Stand with us in reforming the Concordat, or become one more species crushed by a corrupt system. The door suddenly chimed again, urgent, insistent. Sirena checked the security feed and went pale. Concordat security. A dozen guards. They're overriding the door lock. They've detected our presence, Morvath said grimly. Decision time, Ambassador. Kalen looked at Sirena, seeing his own fear and determination reflected in her eyes. They'd come to this station to answer for a simple territorial dispute. Now they were being asked to lead a rebellion against the most powerful political structure in the galaxy. The door began to open. We're in, Kalen said. But we do this right. No violence. We challenge them legally, politically, using their own rules against them. Agreed, Lashana said quickly. We'll protect you as best we can. But from this moment forward, you're not just representing humanity, you're representing every species that's been suppressed, every voice that's been silenced, every. Concordat security entered, their weapons drawn, neural disruptors, containment fields, enough firepower to subdue any species in the Concordat. The lead guard, a Thraken with 4 optical clusters, swept the room. Human delegation, you are to come with us. You've been summoned before the Triumvirate for emergency hearing. On what charges? Sirena demanded. Conspiracy against the Concordat. Inciting rebellion. Unauthorized collusion with senior species representatives. The guard gestured to Lashana and the others. You three will also be detained for questioning. Under whose authority? Morvith asked calmly. The Triumvirate's. This is a security matter. The Triumvirate cannot detain senior representatives without formal charges approved by the full council, Lashana stated. What you're attempting is illegal. The Thraken's optical clusters contracted. Uncertainty. I have my orders. From Vorith, I assume, Shimmer said. Who is acting outside his legal authority? If you proceed, you'll be complicit in a violation of Concordat law far more serious than anything the humans are accused of. More guards entered, but Kalen noticed something. They weren't advancing. They were waiting, uncertain. Stand down, came a new voice, strong, commanding. A figure entered the quarters, another Vrelin but not Vorith. This one's sensory horns were marked with the silver bands of the diplomatic corps. I am Arbiter Kelthera, Vorith's deputy. These detentions are not authorized by proper procedure. But the Supreme Arbiter ordered. The Supreme Arbiter has overstepped his authority, Kelthera said firmly. I am invoking Diplomatic Immunity Clause 47. These individuals are protected under diplomatic protocols until formal charges are filed through proper channels. The Thraken guard looked between Kelthera and his detention orders, clearly torn. Finally he lowered his weapon. I will report this to my superiors. You do that, Kelthera said. The security team withdrew, though Kalen noticed they stationed themselves in the corridor, not leaving, just waiting. Kelthera turned to the group, her four arms crossed in a gesture that somehow conveyed both respect and exasperation. You've created quite the situation. Vorith is furious. The Nexian is calling for emergency council sessions. Half the Concordat is choosing sides in a conflict that didn't exist 3 days ago. You're not here to arrest us? Kalen asked cautiously. I'm here because someone needs to prevent this from escalating into actual violence. I don't agree with Vorith's methods, even if I understand his concerns. You've destabilized millennia of established order. Established injustice, Sirena corrected. Perhaps. Kelthera's expression was unreadable. But change this rapid, this radical, it could tear the Concordat apart. Species that have coexisted peacefully for epochs are suddenly on opposing sides. Trade agreements are being suspended. Diplomatic relationships are fracturing. Is that what you wanted? We wanted fair treatment under the law, Kalen said. Nothing more. Then you were naive. Because you poked a nest of political wasps and now everyone's getting stung. She paused. However, I believe in the law, not in power for its own sake. So I will give you warning. Vorith is planning something. He's meeting with the Nexian and the emissary in 3 hours. Whatever they decide, it won't be good for you. Why are you telling us this? Lashana asked. Because the Vrelin Dominion is more than one angry arbiter. Some of us remember why we joined the Concordat in the first place. To create a just system, not to perpetuate power. If you're going to fight Vorith, fight smart. Don't give him an excuse to brand you as rebels or terrorists. Kelthera left as quickly as she'd arrived. The group stood in silence for a moment, processing everything. Finally, Morvith spoke. The coalition meets in 1 hour in Sector 7 Theta. Will you address them? Kalen looked at Sirena. She nodded slowly. We'll be there, he said. But we're going to need a plan that doesn't involve getting everyone killed. Working on that, Shimmer said, their form flickering with what might have been humor. We have 1 hour to save the Concordat from itself. Should be plenty of time. Despite everything, Kalen smiled. They'd somehow gone from diplomatic embarrassment to revolutionary leaders in 3 days. If they survived this, it would make one hell of a story. The resolution. Sector 7 Theta was an old part of the Grand Concordat Station, a section built in the earliest days when the Concordat was young and optimistic. The meeting chamber was circular, designed when the member species numbered in the dozens, not thousands. Now it held representatives from 200 species, packed so tightly that atmospheric mixtures competed and translation matrices strained under the linguistic diversity. Kalen and Sirena stood at the chamber's center, surrounded by beings who had existed when Earth was still forming its first oceans. The weight of their attention was almost physical. They're looking to us for answers, Sirena whispered. What do we tell them? Before Kalen could respond, Lashana's energy form brightened, calling the assembly to order. We gather in secrecy because we must, not because we are ashamed. What we discuss here is the future of the Concordat itself. The human delegates have sparked a conversation that should have happened millennia ago. Ambassador Thorn, would you address the assembly? Kalen stepped forward, acutely aware that every word would be analyzed, recorded, potentially used against them. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I know more about the Concordat than species who helped build it. Humanity is young. We make mistakes. We're probably making several right now. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through some delegates. But youth has one advantage: we see things as they are, not as they've always been. We don't accept injustice just because it's traditional. And when we encountered a system that punishes good faith actors while protecting the powerful, we did what humans do: we asked why. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I know what some of you are thinking. That we're troublemakers. That we don't understand how things work. That we should shut up and learn our place. And maybe you're right. But I look around this chamber and see 200 species who privately agree that something is wrong. The question is, what are we going to do about it? A Prenthian delegate, their crystalline form chiming softly, spoke up. The triumvirate controls resource allocation, trade routes, defense coordination. To challenge them is to risk everything our species have built. Is it? Morvith rumbled. Or is that exactly what they want you to believe? The Grenthian collective has performed analysis. The triumvirate's actual power is mostly perception and tradition. If even a quarter of this assembly stood together, we would command more economic and political influence than the triumvirate combined. But they have the military, another delegate protested, a Viridian species known for their tactical brilliance. Do they? Shimmer asked. The Concordat Defense Force draws personnel from all member species. Do you truly believe soldiers will fire on their own peoples if ordered to suppress legitimate political reform? The chamber erupted in debate. Kalen let it continue for several minutes before raising his hand for silence. We're getting ahead of ourselves. This isn't about overthrowing the triumvirate. It's about fixing a broken system. Spoken like someone who's never dealt with entrenched power, a cynical voice called out, a Corthan representative. They won't change voluntarily. Then we force change through legal means, Sirena said, stepping up beside Kalen. Look, I've spent the last 72 hours reading everything I can about Concordat structure. The triumvirate has power because we give it to them. But the charter, the actual founding document, distributes authority differently. There are provisions that have never been used, procedures that have been forgotten, checks and balances that were designed for exactly this situation. She projected documents into the chamber's display system. Provision 17 was just the beginning. There's also Provision 23, which allows for the formation of a secondary council with review authority over triumvirate decisions. And Provision 41, which permits any coalition of 50 or more species to demand direct democratic vote on major policy changes. Those provisions haven't been invoked in thousands of years, Lashana noted. Because everyone assumed they couldn't be, Sirena countered. But they're still law. Legally binding. If we form a secondary council and demand reforms, the triumvirate would have to respond through legal channels, not military ones. They'll challenge the legality, someone said. Let them, Kalen replied. We'll argue it before the full Concordat assembly. Publicly. Let every species see the triumvirate fighting to prevent democratic oversight. Let everyone see who's really protecting the system and who's protecting their power. Morvitha's rocky form shifted thoughtfully. A political strategy rather than military. Force them to fight on our terms, where their advantages are minimized. The Grenthian collective supports this approach. One by one, other delegates voiced support. Not all. Some still feared retribution, some genuinely believed the current system was best. But when Lashana called for a formal vote, 173 species committed to forming a secondary council under Provision 23. It's done then, Lashana said. We move forward with. The chamber doors exploded inward. Concordat security poured in, but these weren't regular guards. These were triumvirate elite, soldiers equipped with technology that could subdue even the most powerful species. Their commander was a being Kalen didn't recognize, something mechanical and ancient. This assembly is illegal, the commander stated in a voice like grinding gears. You are all under arrest for conspiracy against the Concordat. Under whose authority? Morvith demanded. The triumvirates. Emergency powers have been invoked. Emergency powers require approval from the full council, Shimmer protested. There's been no vote. There's been a threat to Concordat stability. The triumvirate has acted. Resist and you will be subdued. The chamber tensed. Kalen saw species preparing defensive measures, weapon systems activating. This was about to turn into a massacre. Stop. Kalen shouted. Everyone stand down. Don't give them an excuse. The human is wise, the commander said. Surrender peacefully. I said everyone stand down. Including you, Commander. Because what you're doing right now is illegal and you know it. I have my orders. From beings acting outside their legal authority. Emergency powers can only be invoked for external threats. War, natural disaster, existential crisis. Political disagreement doesn't qualify. By enforcing illegal orders, you're the one breaking Concordat law. The commander hesitated. Just for a moment, but Kalen saw it. You're a soldier, Kalen continued. You swore an oath to protect the Concordat and uphold its laws. Not to serve the Triumvirate's political interests. What we're doing here, forming a secondary council under Provision 23, is completely legal. The Triumvirate is trying to prevent legal political activity. Who's really threatening the Concordat? The human speaks truth, a new voice said. Arbiter Kelthera entered the chamber and behind her dozens more Vrelin, but these wore the insignia of the Legal Review Corps. I am invoking my authority as Deputy Supreme Arbiter to countermand these detention orders. The emergency powers invocation is legally invalid. Commander, stand down. The mechanical commander's optical sensors swiveled between Kelthera and the door, where reinforcements waited. Supreme Arbiter Vorith will. Supreme Arbiter Vorith is facing a formal inquiry for abuse of authority, Kelthera interrupted. I have documentation of 17 separate legal violations he's committed in the last 48 hours. He's been suspended from his position pending investigation. Shock rippled through the chamber. Furthermore, Kelthera continued, I have formal declarations from 68 Concordat species supporting the formation of a secondary council. The human's legal interpretation is correct. Provision 23 not only permits this, it was designed for exactly this purpose. The commander stood motionless for a long moment. Finally, I will require confirmation from the Nexian. The Nexian is also under investigation, said Morvith. The Grenthian Collective has filed formal complaints regarding selective prosecution and judicial bias. As have the Etherians, Lashana added. And 41 other species. The commander's form seemed to deflate slightly. This is unprecedented. Yes, Kalen agreed. That's kind of the point. The elite forces withdrew, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Kelthera approached Kalen and Sirena. You've won in case you haven't realized. Not completely, Vorith and his allies will fight every step, but you've forced fundamental change. The secondary council will be formed. Legal reforms will be debated. The Triumvirate's absolute authority is broken. Why did you help us? Sirena asked. Because I'm Vrelin, not blind. Our species was once like the Triumvirate, powerful, aggressive, convinced of our superiority. The Treaty of Eternal Accord was created to stop us from dominating the galaxy. We learned humility the hard way. I won't watch us become oppressors again. She paused. Also, you were right. About everything. The system was broken. Someone needed to fix it. Over the next hours, events moved rapidly. The full Concordat Assembly was convened, the first time all 1,400 species had gathered in centuries. The secondary council was formally established, with representation from all species tiers. Legal reforms were proposed, debated, refined. The Carthos sector case was resolved almost as an afterthought. Boundary clarifications were established, human settlement was approved with proper documentation, and the incident was ruled a good faith error requiring no penalties. 30 days later, Kalen and Sirena stood once more in the council chamber, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. The Triumvirate remained, but now flanked by the secondary council. The 200 species who'd gathered in secret now sat openly, equal voices in Concordat governance. The Nexian's geometric patterns were subdued as it spoke. The council recognizes Ambassador Kalen Thorn and aide Sirena Vex. Your challenge to Concordat procedure has resulted in the most significant governmental restructuring in our history. Some view this as catastrophic. Others view it as overdue. History will judge. We didn't set out to restructure anything, Kalen said honestly. We just wanted fair treatment. And in demanding it, you reminded us what the Concordat was meant to be, Lashana said from her position on the secondary council. Not a hierarchy of power, but a community of equals. Vorith was conspicuously absent, under investigation, stripped of authority, facing sanctions. But Kelthera had taken his position, and her first act had been to establish transparent legal guidelines accessible to all species in all languages. As the session concluded, Zilfrin approached the humans. You go home soon, yes? Tomorrow, Sirena confirmed. Earth will want a full report on what we accidentally started. Not accident, Zilfrin said firmly. Courage. You stood unafraid when fear was expected. You questioned when silence was required. You showed 73 minor species, now with voices in secondary council. That change is possible. Kalen smiled tiredly. We nearly got everyone killed. But you didn't. And now, my children's children will live in a concordat where justice is not determined by age of civilization but by truth of argument. That is worth any risk. The humans departed the Grand Concordat the next day, their transport escorted by an honor guard of 42 species, every one of humanity's allies in the reform movement. As the Wanderer's hope jumped to faster than light, Kalen stood at the viewport one last time. We came here to answer for a territorial dispute, Sirena said beside him. We left having reorganized galactic government. Humans tend to overcomplicate things. Or maybe we just refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. She smiled. The Concordat will never be the same. No, Kalen agreed. But then, neither will humanity. We've gone from applicants to reformers in 1 week. Earth's not going to know what to do with us. Promote us probably. Then send us back to make sure we didn't accidentally start a war. They both laughed, exhausted and relieved and aware that their work was far from over. The secondary council would take years to fully implement reforms. The triumvirate's supporters would resist every change. Political battles lay ahead that would make their trial look simple. But in the council chamber of 1,000 species, 2 humans had stood unafraid. They'd questioned the unquestionable, challenged the unchallengeable, and proven that justice was worth fighting for regardless of the odds. And across the Concordat, in 1,000 chambers on 1,000 worlds, other species watched and learned and began to believe that they too could stand unafraid. The revolution had just begun.